Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Perspective Philosophy, where we try to better our perceptions of the world through philosophical discussion. So, in today's episode, I'm going to be discussing the whole OnlyFans debacle, and that means OnlyFans betraying its content creators for cash dollar. We're going to get into why and how, but we're also going to talk about solutions for those content creators that are going to be affected by this. Many of you don't realize, or at least many people who are very critical of OnlyFans content creators don't realize that the vast majority of content creators on OnlyFans are not, in fact, millionaires. Most of which earn an average of $1,000 a month, and that includes the largest creators. So we could imagine that the median average, is perhaps even lower, something around $300 to $500 a month, and is really a supplement to their paycheck. So this entire incident that is going on with OnlyFans has come as a shock to many. OnlyFans is banning all explicit content from their site, and that is important because explicit, not adult. There will be some quote-unquote adult content in that there will be nudity, but there will not be any sex work at all. Okay, so it does. Anna Rugg, thank you. So so what we've got to understand first is what is actually happening. So OnlyFans released a statement about this, which I will see about pulling up. I can find where it's gone. Apparently not. 1 second. So okay, so here is the official statement. Bring this up on stream, make it a bit easier for everyone, in case you want to pause and read it. Okay. Okay, so effective the 1st of October, OnlyFans will prohibit the posting of content containing sexually explicit conduct in order to ensure the long-term sustainability of the platform and continue to host an inclusive community of creators and fans. We must evolve our content guidelines. Creators will continue to be allowed to post content containing nudity so long as it's consistent with our acceptable use policy. These changes are to comply with requests for banking partners and payout providers. We will be sharing details in the coming days, and we will be actively supporting and guide our creators through this change in content guidelines. Okay. So, as you can see, they are banning all on adult explicit content. Essentially, any sexually explicit content is going away. So, porn, anything like that. And as many of you will know, that's basically the bread and butter for OnlyFans. So, most people would think of OnlyFans as being a porn site or some sort of sex site. They wouldn't think of it in any other way. So what we have to understand is why this has happened, considering they are generating an incredibly large income from this. OnlyFans has over 2 million content creators and has over 120 million subscribers, the vast majority of which are coming from this niche. So why would they undo their business model? Why would they rapidly change or massively change their business model? Well, we're going to get into that in a second, because there's a pretty easy explanation, but it's not what some people are saying. So people like Hassan have come out and said it's to do with evangelicals for some reason. Hassan's saying that Visa and MasterCard are just bending to the will of evangelicals, which is just absurd. They don't have that much influence and power. I think you're just attributing way too much credit to really, a minority conservative movement, not even the vast majority of conservatives. And I think that the reason he's doing that is really just to play into the whole right versus left kind of thing that he kind of does all the time. So what is actually going on will happen in a second. But before we get onto that, let's talk about solutions. So if you are a content creator on OnlyFans, what should you do? Because this could be your entire grind, man. This could be all of the money that you make just gone, right? You could just be losing your entire platform. So the first thing that I want you to realize is, I want you to know is just don't panic. Everything is going to be okay. Everything's going to be fine. Okay. The second thing I want you to remember is that your audience is your audience and not OnlyFans' audience. OnlyFans did not build, Charlie. OnlyFans did not build your content. They did not build your marketing scheme. They didn't build anything that in your audience. You did that. And you most likely didn't use OnlyFans for any of it. They don't have a search feature. They don't have a discover feature on the platform. So your marketing is outside of OnlyFans anyway. So you don't even have to worry about losing your marketing. Your marketing's always been separate from OnlyFans. The next thing is that you are not being deplatformed entirely. You are being restricted. You can actually maintain your platform and use it as a way to promote to your audience. You can actually send your audience your expired subs links to external sources. For example, your Twitter. You just can't send them anywhere where there's paid content. So yeah, you can't send them to a new website where you're charging, but you can send them to your Twitter. So if you have expired subs that, or when this happens and your subs expire, you can send them to your Twitter. So that means you can market to your audience. Don't worry, that is still intact. Okay, so now that you know that you've got this possibility of maintaining the marketing of the marketing to your audience, and you can maintain your audience, now you need somewhere to basically send your audience so that you can provide the content, right? You need to think about, okay, where am I going to profit from this endeavor? Because if you are just sending them to somewhere like your Twitter, well, you can't charge people money on Twitter. So you need to redirect them again. So once you get them to your Twitter, my suggestion, okay, that was weird. My suggestion would be to make your own website. Okay, and I have a few reasons for this. The first reason is that no one can take your website away from you. If you make your own website and you send people over there to purchase your content, you can do this. You can have an email marketing campaign. You can collect their emails. You can make sure that you can maintain your audience regardless of any small policy changes made by any platform. Because this isn't the first time this has happened to sex workers. This happened with Patreon. This is going to happen again, most likely with another company, because sex work is not really given the best rep in our society, and there are only a few platforms that are as stable as you'd want them to be. The only place that you can truly trust is your own platform. Even places like Twitter and other supposedly acceptable or accepting places will be subject to change to the whims of the market. So if you want to maintain your market outside of any small policy changes, make your own website. Making your own website is really easy these days. You can make your own website by just, I actually have a BlueHost link in the description if you want to check it out. You don't have to. You can go check it out yourself, do your research, do what you want to do. I will gain commission if you do purchase through it, and that's just, that's it, right? But you don't have to do that. You can go through anyone you want. The reason I link BlueHost is because I know BlueHost. Essentially, they're a platform that basically provide hosting, but they can also provide you the domain for as little as $275 a month. So that's like £35 a year. So we're talking about a £35 a year investment to the infrastructure of your website. So if you need hosting for a website, BlueHost, £35 a year. Next thing I'd say is you need to go to wordpress.org. Now this is regardless of any hosting you use. Do not use wordpress.com. WordPress.org is free. WordPress.com is not free and is really using the same open source software as WordPress.org, but offers a way to help you build your website. You probably do not need that. So do not go to WordPress.com. Go to WordPress.org. It's entirely free. The next thing I would say is you can get themes from somewhere like Envato Market, or I think there's some other places you can get themes from. You can also buy, things like Divi. You can get Divi. You could get Elementor. I would recommend Divi over Elementor because they keep updating from what I've seen. But overall, you can just buy a complete theme where you can basically download it, install it on your website, and your theme, you can just replace the images and the text, and it will be a fully working website. Basically, it's really easy. It just makes the whole website building process essentially done for you, and the update regularly. You can get them from Envato Marketplace. Just make sure that it's compatible for your needs, that it's doing what you want, that it's updating regularly. Do your own research. But what I'm trying to convey with all of this is really easy. You can build a website now incredibly easy. Don't use Wix. Don't use Squarespace or whatever. Make your own website and you have a sustainable place to essentially support yourself through any economic up and downs. Okay, now that I've got that out of the way, I really suggest that, because as a socialist, and even if you were a capitalist, I suggest that you're just not being dependent upon the whims of another corporation. The next thing I'd suggest is that if you want, let's say you are scared of making your website, let's say you don't want to do that and you want to profit from somewhere else, you've still got Snapchat, you've still got, you've still got other ways of, essentially making money. You've got AVN. AVN is another place to go to make adult content, and they are entirely explicit content from what I'm aware. So the chances of them falling through are very unlikely. So if, worst comes to worst, make an AVN account, link it in your Twitter, direct everyone to your Twitter, tell them you're on AVN, do some sort of promotional offer, and get your audience to wherever it is that you're setting up. But this is not the end of the world. I don't want you to panic. Everything's going to be okay. And just remember that you are what people are going to see, that they're wanting to see, not OnlyFans. OnlyFans is just a hosting service. And to be entirely honest with you, they take a considerable amount of your income anyway, 20%. So don't worry. It's not a big deal. You can get through this. Okay. Right. Okay. Now, why has OnlyFans done this? Okay. Let's get into that. Why would a corporation which made $5 billion, which paid out its creators $5 billion since 2016, do this? Especially since the majority of the income come from 2020 and this year. So why would it take what is a growing market? It doubled I think it increased its percentage signups by over 500% within a year. So we're talking about massive growth. Why would they do this? They get paid 20% of that $5 billion, so they've made a billion, a clean billion. That's my Twitch title wrong again. Why does Twitch do this to me? I'll sort it out. Okay. Okay, we'll get onto that in a second. I'll sort my Twitch out. But okay, so why would OnlyFans do this? Oh God, what's going on? Stop it, Twitch. Stop it. Okay, right. Okay. Okay, so why would OnlyFans do this? They've made at least a cool billion, right? Well, the reason that OnlyFans would do this, oh, thank you very much for your donation.
Donated £5. Joining your stream after a long time, but happy to see you are still active and that the channel has grown so much. Here's a small contribution.
Thank you very much, Anurag. And yeah, it is growing. I've gained 1,000 subs in a month. Like it's crazy, man. Absolutely great. So, but back to the topic at hand. The reality of the situation is they've made $1 billion in like the majority of the money they've made in the last year, and they've made a cool $1 billion. So why would they cash out? Okay. So the first thing is to secure investment. The reality of the situation is that most investors are actually interested in, they actually have contracts preventing them investing in adult industries. So they won't be able to invest in adult services. Like, so we're talking here about investment funds where they've essentially collected, they act as investors for a body of individuals who give them money to invest. And they basically say to their clients, don't worry, we're not going to invest anything into anything of like drugs or explicit content or anything that would get you in trouble. Don't worry, we're going to make this safe for work. We're investing in tech companies. We're investing in essentially clean stuff, clean image stuff, right? And so they are contracted to their clients not to invest into businesses like OnlyFans, okay? And so when they go and invest in another company, they have to basically say, look, we can only invest in you if you've got a clean image. If you've got this image which is not going to essentially alienate our clients. And so what they do is they come across someone like OnlyFans, like some business like OnlyFans, and they just tell them to F off, essentially. They just will not invest. They won't go anywhere. They legally cannot touch it, right? And so OnlyFans was struggling for investment. It was really struggling to find investors because, let's be honest, like no one's going to essentially break that sort of status quo. And so what should be really a massive pool of investment for OnlyFans has diminished to a very small body of individuals who are willing to invest. So what OnlyFans had to do was ditch the sex work label, the business model, or it was to continue down its path and accept its place within the market. Now, that's not what it wanted to do. It wanted to grow. And you've got to remember that it's already grown so much. So if it wanted to grow and increase the market size, it needed investors. It needed to branch out into new markets, into broader markets, namely iOS and Android. iOS and Android are not going to allow adult content on the App Store, right? Now, the reason for that is because they themselves are contracted with other investors and they are contracted with other services. So what you have here is a web of tech and web hosting contracts that cannot go anywhere near sex work. Now, some of these are from a long time ago, some of these are more recent, but regardless, it's standard practice. And so the investors are just not going anywhere near this content. So we'll have a real problem here. If you're OnlyFans, you're looking to grow, no investors, you can't move on to iOS and Android, and over 50% of your market is wanting to watch from mobile services, and they can't, they've got to watch from a browser. How are you going to grow? Well, you can't grow, right? You're going to stagnate, and stagnation in the market is death. So that's just it, right? Now, then there was more concerns. Just because they've not only grown to the point in which they are, yes, now $1 billion industry in themselves, but now they have their own regulatory concerns, right? Because OnlyFans, having millions of creators, was actually doing a terrible job in maintaining the safety and security of its on the platform. It wasn't actually providing a service which was what's the word? Like regulated correctly. They were allowing content which was illegal or banned on the platform to exist on the platform. And part of the reason for that is that requires a considerable amount of investment. In the early days, small numbers of creators means that it's not hard to regulate. But if you've got millions of creators signing up and thousands of creators signing up every day, some using fake IDs that are underage, some people performing content which is illegal, whether it's things like bestiality, even was reported, people eating feces and disgusting things like that. So the way to essentially go through this content is you would have to hire staff to manually check all of this content, right? And that increases costs. And so you get these regulatory costs. And on top of that, you are almost undoubtedly going to miss some. That content might be something that is illegal and that someone might sue you for. It could be stolen content, for example. Now that means that when they find out their content is being stolen and sold on your platform, they are going to sue you. And so they have an increased cost for legal services. So as you can see, like regulatory costs are booming, right? Like they as they grow, the regulation is going to cost more and more, right? Stop the kink shame. If anyone genuinely doesn't think that eating feces is disgusting, I think you deserve to be shamed. I don't even care, right? And also, I hate. Can we just point out for a second? Kink shaming, like quote unquote, is the dumbest thing ever. There are certain things that absolutely like deserve to be shamed. Like just because it's a kink doesn't mean it's healthy, okay, like decent, like moral. Like someone doing something that is deplorable and wrong to someone else, like genuinely committing acts of violence. That's not a kink. That's wrong. Like, I'm sorry. It's just the way it works. Like, there are things that individuals can and cannot consent to. There are limits to consent. And that's just, I'm sorry, that's just the way the cookie crumbles, right? So, but that's part of the problem, right? Because people think and associate all sex workers with this fringe minority, right? Which is what's harming the image and preventing investors as well. So, yeah, so the Financial Times said that, obviously, quoting the thing, long-term sustainability of the platform. So that just means to get the next round of investors. So the next round of investors are going to essentially base it off of the likelihood of growth. And the likelihood of growth is going to be dependent upon their ability to branch out onto like things like iOS. And since they can't branch out on iOS without changing the content that's on there, they've got to either change their business model or they've got to essentially just be accept their place in the market. Now that would just mean that they wouldn't be able to get investors and they're just going to have to continue as is and run their business as is. Now that would be fine for most people, right? Like most individuals who are making, like most corporations that are making, I don't know, a couple of $100 million a year, probably at this point, that's not a bad turnover, man. Like certainly not. But they want to grow. It's not about, the game they are playing is not about productivity, like a normal capitalist game. It's post-capitalist. It's about virtual. It's a virtual game. It's a meta game. It's about securing market investment so that they can secure in the future even more market investment. They are building a game on top of the game that exists in productivity. And this happens all the time in things like the stock market, and it just happens all over the place. Like Nescafe, for example, made more money in the stock market than it did selling coffee. This is just how capitalism works these days, right? So, like as you can see, someone close to the company said, you can either be the biggest porn site in the world, or you can have a social media platform that, in terms of its business model, is amazing. The business model was suffering in terms of its affiliation with the porn industry. Like it just was. So the reality of the situation is there's just going to have to, they will have to buckle to some pressure in order to gain investment. But what I think is probably more perverse about this, if I'm entirely honest, what's probably more perverse about this, if I'm entirely honest, is not the wanting to secure investment. It's probably the desire for the lead investor or the seed investor or the original investors to pull out. They are wanting to essentially profit off this business that they've grown. And to profit, they need to sell their stake in the company. And to sell their stake in the company, they need to be bought out. And to be bought out, there's going to have to be some investors. And so what we have is probably about half of the billion that they've secured with this banking relations, like $1 billion, is probably going to be paid to probably one or two investors, like primary investors. And then the rest will be invested in the business. But then this benefits the company in another way, which I'll talk about in a second. So the important thing to recognize is they've already secured $1 billion in investment. So most people that are looking at this, like, why would OnlyFans, if it has something like it's made about $1 billion in 5 years, seek to undermine its own market? And the reason for that is because all of the money that it made in 5 years, it made off a single deal with a bank. Right? That is how these businesses make money. When we're talking about like BlueHost and so on, these businesses make a shit ton of money because of investors and building off investment portfolios. So they have one round of investment that leads to another round of investment, and they are probably going to, have this even up to 100 billion in terms of losses. Right? I actually had a conversation with an economist before coming on here, so that is how I know this. Right? Okay. So, they've already made $1 billion in a deal. So they've already made more in one deal than they did in 5 years of running this platform from every content creator that's already on it. So this deal is just in terms of what they can do with this money. They are totally free now to invest and move the business any way they want. The second thing is paying off these primary investors, paying them off and giving them essentially letting them profit from their investment, because they're wanting to profit in terms of like, look, okay, I invested like, I don't know, 100,000 in OnlyFans when it first started up. That money is now what I got 20% of that. So I won 250 million for that startup capital that I gave you, right? That's like that's essentially how that's going to work. So these investors are most likely going to get paid off, and it'll probably be about half or so of the money, like 200 to 500 million dollars. Okay, so that's just essentially the original investors bailing out. Now they're bailing out. It is disgusting. They are profiting off the people who made them money, right? They are profiting off creators who, to be entirely honest with you, provided all of the content, did all of the marketing, because the marketing, well, a lot of the marketing anyway, because the marketing had to be done independently of OnlyFans, and they still took 20% of their money to fuel the costs of the business and so on. So they've really profited massively off the backs of these creators, right? Like, it's just undeniable. And then they're walking away, leaving people without livelihoods and, cashing out hundreds of millions. It's deplorable. But this also benefits the corporation as well. So the corporation, after paying someone, let's say 200 billion for 200 billion, why do I keep saying that? 200 million for 20% of its shares, can then at the next round of investment go, look, you investors, look, we've already made 200 billion on 20% of our 200 million of 20% of our shares. You are going to have to invest more than that because we've grown. We're worth more than that now. So the more that they pay these original investors anyway, the more leverage it gives them at the next round of investment. So each round of investment is kind of a way to make more off the next round of investment. And it's a way to extract more from these essentially like investment companies, right? Which may be worth like 150 billion, like 150 billion. So in terms of, what is $1 billion $1 billion to them, it's actually not that much in terms of what they invest. So long as they can 5x this investment, it's not even an issue for them. Like, yeah, take 10 billion, just make us 50 or something, or make us like 100 billion, like this is kind of like how it works, right? So that is essentially one of the reasons why they're pulling out, right? They have increasing costs. They've already capped their market in terms of this industry, or like they're capping out their market in terms of this industry. And their lead investors are probably wanting to pull out. Okay. So that means that essentially the only way they can go is to gain investment, to expand the market, to cover their costs, and increase growth into a new market. And because of the way that the contracts work in the industry, they've just got to sever ties with sex work. Chances are they knew this was going to happen. Chances are they were not oblivious. Even though the director in April stated to the Financial Times that they were not planning on removing adult content. I could imagine that there's two ways that's went down. Either they definitely knew they were going down this route, which I suspect, or two, they tried a round of investment and it failed so heavily that they resorted to this. But it's one of the two, really. Right? It's genuinely not a very dumb move by OnlyFans. It's probably the best business move they could make, if I'm honest. It's an inconsiderate, evil business move, but it gives them, if they are wanting to grow and increase investment opportunities, they're doing what benefits them. Essentially, it's just the truth, right? Okay. And here is an article on some more of the regulation issues. On essentially BBC investigating how OnlyFans handles illegal sex, right? Like issues with child protection and everything. I know that there was even a 16-year-old who managed to get onto the platform using fake IDs, and it's awful, right? So there is a lot of issues here. Okay, so that's why OnlyFans have done this. It's essentially Hassan. Actually, let's pull up the tweet. I just want to show why Hassan is just totally he's just overly simplified this to such a degree it really hurts. Okay. Okay. So there's Hassan's tweet. Visa and MasterCard buckling to evangelical psychos and successfully pressuring OnlyFans to limit sex work on their platforms is awful but expected. Caving to that demand when sex work built your platform is betrayal. Everyone loves sex work but dehumanizes the people who make it. Now, there's so much in that tweet that I actually agree with. For example, the public, that we're going to get onto this next, actually the ideological movement as to why investors are so opposed to being affiliated with sex work. And the reality is it has to do with you, the consumer. They are buckling to consumer demand. That's just what they're doing. They are trying to facilitate the market and facilitate their own interests within the market by buckling to consumer demand. The next is, this was expected. This was expected in some respects. There are numerous platforms that were pointing out OnlyFans was making remarks about how they are safer, work friendly, and all that stuff. So they've already said that, like, we're not just sex content, and they were very much trying to promote and only promote their safer work content creators, right? Because they wanted their image to be about safer work, even though it was massively about sex work, right? So we're going to see, they're going to have to make a real big shift in terms of building this market away from what it was, but whatever. Okay. The next is yeah, Visa and MasterCard did increase cost for sex work, right? Because that's again tied to the contracts involved in investment and so on. But like, look, that's not coming from, look, it's not all coming from Visa and MasterCard, and it's not evangelical cycles, right? So first, yes, first Visa and MasterCard haven't also increased costs on OnlyFans, right? So OnlyFans is increasing costs in regulatory costs on Visa and MasterCard, on a stagnating market and wanting to branch and grow, so needing investment but increasing costs, has led them to this scenario. But it's not coming from evangelical cycles. It's coming from you. It's coming from you. It's coming from dogmatism within. It's coming from dogmatism in the market first. It's coming from contracts in the market and how these have related to investors. So the investors have promised that, we won't invest in sex work and so on. We'll keep you a clean image. But the reason that those are promising that in the first place is because a clean image in our society is associated with being away from sex work, right? Now, this is a double-edged sword. And so we're now moving on to the ideological takes in this. So first, the taboo is actually a good thing, right? You're not going to... people are going to like, wait, what do you mean the taboo is a good thing, right? Like, what do you mean the taboo of sex work is a good thing, right? That's not... I'm not saying that it's good in every way. I'm saying that it has some value, mostly for the fact that it limits the supply in the market. So the reason why everyone's not doing OnlyFans is because of the taboo. And if they were doing it, the increased supply would mean increased competition, which means lower prices and higher costs. Lower prices and essentially more difficulty competing, which means higher costs. And so you would find that sex work would be less lucrative if there was no taboo. The taboo is actually making the sex work more lucrative. If there was no taboo, then there would be a smaller market, right? There would be a larger market, but it would be more saturated. So, yeah, that's one thing. It's kind of a double-edged sword because the more taboo there is, the more issues they're going to have, and essentially maintaining themselves, the more personal issues a content creator will have, and so on. But the more likelihood they're going to get paid higher. So it's shit, but it also does lead to individuals looking to, essentially express their desires in a way that they are willing to pay for. Reduced taboo may mean that people do it for free, just for the sexual expression of it, right? If there was no taboo at all, you might find people are just willing to facilitate these sexual experiences to the point in which there is no market anymore, right? And so you've got to remember that the taboo, although is negative for the individual, and we should not be shaming or harming anyone. I would like to say that, like, anyone who shames or harms sex workers is a deplorable, horrible person, and is, to be entirely honest, far worse to society than any sex worker. But the taboo is part and parcel of why sex work is lucrative. The next thing is the taboo is part and parcel of why sex work cannot become a bigger market. It's part and parcel as to why sex work isn't growing and expanding into an even larger market, which may, essentially remove issues with saturation and supply, right? Because if you're able to provide content on numerous platforms, if you're able to hit more, increase your demand, right? If you're able to supply to those an increased market size, well, then you're not a saturated market anymore, even if you have more creators, right? If you're able to get on iOS and Android, you will essentially still profit from it, right? So this is why it's a double-edged sword. It's maintaining the market size at a certain size, but it's also one of the reasons why the market size is where it is. Whether it will go up or down is depending upon how individuals interact with sex and the consumption of sex as a product within our society. Okay? Now, what we have to ask ourselves is, why ideologically, investors are so opposed to being associated with sex. And I think that associating it with evangelical Christians or, essentially fundamentalists in religion and so on is just a really bad take. The American government is Democrats, for one. They're quite a progressive government, quote unquote. The majority of the United States is not evangelical Christians who are, looking to put forward some sort of Puritan mandate. The majority of the United States is just your average everyday consumer, and they probably consume porn in some form. Almost every adult on the internet is probably consuming sexual content in some way, shape, or form. Right? Let's be entirely honest with you, right? So what we'll have to ask ourselves is, if that is the case, if the majority of the adults, or at least working adult population is, or even non-working, just the majority of the adult population is consuming sex on the internet in some form, why is it so taboo? Right. So why are sex workers treated the way they are? Because if you see how sex workers are treated, they are either met with usually hatred and scorn and belittlement, and they are just treated as second-class citizens by many, right? It undermines future work opportunities. They face prejudice. And why is that? They're doing something which is actually being consumed by a large amount of the population, and they're enjoying it. Okay? They are happy someone is facilitating that role, yet won't associate with those who actually perform it, who actually facilitate that product. This happens all over in our society. Okay? This happens with the meat, dairy, and egg industry. If you would go to someone, like, would you associate with a slaughterhouse worker? What do you think of slaughterhouse workers? They're probably going to say psycho, right? Even though they are the ones buying the products that the slaughterhouse workers provide, these people in the meatpacking facilities provide, they will still look down on these people who are providing this service because they think that this service is somehow shameful. You see, I don't think that this service is shameful at all. Slaughterhouse work, yeah, in the sense that, look, you're actually committing something that's highly unethical. But sex work, you're not. You're not doing something necessarily unethical. You could just be, it's some form of sexual expression, artistic expression even. So what is the issue? And I think that it comes from our own inability to reconcile ourselves with our consumptive behaviors. I think that the average everyday individual struggles to engage with sex, sexual explicit content in a way which is healthy, in a way which is mediated, in a way in which they don't feel some sort of embarrassment from being associated with, and more often than not, even wish that they did not do it. Right? In recent news, in this year, there was a man who killed sex workers. He killed Asian, there were Asian massage therapists who he was going to, essentially like a brothel kind of scenario from what I'm aware. But he was also an evangelical Christian, right? And he couldn't reconcile his evangelical beliefs about fornication and desire with his desire to express his sexual, with his sexual drives, which are moving him towards taboo. Now, the reality of the situation is that when you start looking into psychoanalysis, and I'm only a beginner, it seems to me that excess is the only form of consumption, right? People do not consume in anything that they don't find excessive. So the more that you lower let's say you lower your exposure to sex, the more excessive small sexual acts will be experienced, which means that they'll be felt to be more liberating and more fulfilling. And this idea of liberation comes from what is a drive for mediation, a drive for control over yourself, whilst trying to maintain a desire for expression of yourself. And so you've got this confliction within yourself. You're trying to both reel in your desires and make sure that they are safe and sublimated and healthy, whilst also trying to express them in a way which actually satisfies the underlying drive. Okay. So this has to be done in a healthy way to be psychoanalytically sort of fulfilling, right? Now, I think that the majority of the population is probably not engaging with their sex drive in a healthy way. I think the majority of the population, especially those that are consuming, for example, free porn on Pornhub, are probably, and other adult sites like that, are probably experiencing levels of high levels of addiction. People are starting to associate as digital sexuals or digisexuals and stuff. Their sex drives are becoming intermingled within a capitalist organization which is trying to extract from them watch time. And so they find themselves being constantly moving back to what is a need to sexually express themselves in a way which is unhealthy. And who do they blame? Do they blame themselves for their inability to regulate their own emotional states? Or do they blame the person who makes the thing they can't stop consuming? They blame the person that makes the thing that they can't stop consuming. It's all your fault. They become misogynists. They become misanthropists. They start blaming the world around them. Why is it like this? Oh my God, if only I lived in a society which didn't have this sexual content, then I would not have all of these problems. You know, and essentially this blaming of the world around them is what leads them to hating content creators. Now, it is true that this society has genuinely tries to impress addictive behaviors onto people in order to extract profit. Like that's like, look, we do it for food, right? Like how many of you, like, you know, if you're gonna order pizza, you go, oh, I want one or two slices of pizza. No, you eat the whole pizza. It's not about just like the way that we modulate and regulate desires is really quite unhealthy in our society. How many people do you know that just get a bag of crisps that are meant to be shared between 6 people and eat it themselves? That is me. Like, I mean, like, let's be entirely honest with you. That's just how our society works, right? We consume to excess. We don't have the necessary institutions to regulate our consumption, and the ways in which we are consuming individualistically are becoming more individualistic. We aren't consuming in a way which is more satisfying, which would be in a way that's built into relationships and would lead people into leading happier lives. Now, the funny thing is I think that this desire for a more human connection, a more sustainable relationship to your own drives, has led people to places like OnlyFans. They are wanting the quote-unquote girlfriend experience, right? They're wanting to experience something that is not so one-sided, something that is essentially more regulated, and something a little bit more human, right? Now, the issue is in some respects, it is also a facade. You're not actually getting a real relationship a lot of the time. You're not getting a friendship. You're not able to fill that like sense of lack and emptiness within yourself. And so many of the people who are even moved to these content creators still hate them because they still can't control themselves and feel wholesome, you know, just feeling at one with themselves because, well, the drives are unmediated and they're not willing to take actions to try and reel them in and show others the respect that they deserve. Now, that is absolutely on them, right? Psychoanalytics, for like psychology 101, you are responsible for your actions, and once you accept that, you're going to engage in recovery. But this is, as our society grows in these behaviors, this is, I think, the fundamentals of why OnlyFans creators are experience such shame, why people shame them so much. The next thing, I think, is envy. Okay, so let's say these OnlyFans creators, right? We're talking some of the best looking, wealthiest, successful people that you will see on a day-to-day basis in your feed. Now, if you look to those people as a way to facilitate your drives and desires, you very well might fall into that either shameful cycle, or you might fall into a healthy consumption. You might go like, look, good for you. I hope you're doing okay, which is the ideal, but I think is fairly rare. I think it's becoming a little bit better with community, but it's fairly rare. The next is, I hate you because you are more successful than me. I wish to be better than you. You're exemplifying the object I wish I was. They're a sex object, right? Like, they're placed into a position where, like, they're being admired by, like, millions sometimes of people, right? Thousands of people, right? And that's going to, I mean, look at it like this, right? If I was friends with Johnny Depp or some other unbelievably handsome man, right? Or anyone was, right? It doesn't matter who it is, right? You're friends with some unbelievably good-looking person, right? Now, that's cool if you're like, oh, right, yeah, Johnny, we're having a great time. You know, like, haha, we're friends. This is all great. Now, let's say you wanted to compete for the attention of someone else. Or let's say you wanted to even feel okay standing next to them, right? Knowing that you're being compared to them. They're not necessarily doing anything to you, but that simple act of comparison makes you feel inadequate. And so who do you blame for your feelings of inadequacy? Is it yourself? Is it your self-esteem? No. It's them. It's them. They're fucking stupid bastard, good-looking people. I wish they were dead. That is essentially where you end up. So, not always. I mean, like, if you're healthy, you go, well, actually, wait a minute. Like, this is fine. Like, I don't have to be the best-looking person in the world. But the more fragile and the more self-conceited you are, the worse it's going to be. Don't get me wrong, like sometimes it's just a feelings of inadequacy because of things that you've had in your life. You might feel traumatized. There might be lots of issues. Like, don't get me wrong, there are numerous issues. But how you cope with it is what's important. We all feel inadequate at times. That's just part of being human, right? We all see ourselves in a state in which we're comparing ourselves to others. But when you compare yourself to others, you always feel, in some respects, at a deficit. And with sex work, it's even worse. These people are actively creating images and objectifying themselves in a way to gain attention. You're probably not. You're probably just subsistent. So when you see some sort of objectified individual online, you see some sort of perfect, constructed product online. These sex workers are not selling themselves, right? Like, no sex worker actually sells themselves, right? And this is the weird thing. Like, people say, oh, you're selling yourself. They don't sell themselves. They sell a service. They sell a product, okay? And that product is perfected, and it's a way and it's a way to get people to consume. But if you aren't wanting to consume it and you are just comparing yourself to it, you're going to feel inadequate. At least you might feel inadequate, right? And in those feelings of inadequacy, if you don't deal with them in a healthy way, lead to envy. They lead to destruction, right? I suggest actually watching ContraPoint's video on envy. It was really good. I can't recommend it more. It's really great, right? Right? So yeah, like, I genuinely think that those two aspects of our psyche are leading to the majority of the ideological rejection of sex work. And then you've got the other aspects, you've got, like, religious things and so on. But I think that's secondary, to be entirely honest with you. I think that this idea of purity comes after, right? Like, some people, I think that a lot of the people who are wanting for a pure society are actually looking for a way to regulate desires, right? They're actually on the side of, like, look, if we remove this sexual content, then we won't need to regulate desires as much. And they're looking to essentially reel themselves in by limiting the sexual actions of the other, right? They're like, look, you do what you're told so that I don't have to worry about my desires, right? Like, and I think that's, like, in places like the Middle East. So in places in the Middle East, for example, when they're making women wear, incredibly, to cover up to X degree, it's usually justified. At least when I've seen it, is justified with, like, look, the way that what you're doing to men in this scenario. Like, it's about, like, limiting and controlling their desires. It's not there's actually anything wrong with a girl or a woman expressing their sexuality. It's that when they express our sexuality, I'm not so confident that I'm going to be able to control my own. And that's the fear that's usually imposed. It's a form of misogyny, and that's why you end up with cultures that are so repressive to women, right? Because it's like men's inability to control themselves, and it has nothing to do with women. And then you also get envy and jealousy, right? You get, for example, you get women who, or feminists, for example, who will say to women, you are undermining us to the patriarchy. You are undermining all of the work that we've done to get rid of this objectification of women. I mean, bypassing the fact that actually they are providing a service, they're in control of the service, and they're actually economically independent. They are no longer a slave to a capitalist mechanism. They no longer have an employer, and they are totally in control of the content they produce, and in many ways have much greater influence than most people in society know they are the slaves, right? Because all they're doing is giving in to the male gaze, right? Well, it's like, no, actually that not necessarily, right? But it's like any form of expression in which you're objectified and you're actually gaining some sort of social power and social recognition. Well, fuck those people, right? And this isn't something which is even considered uncommon in feminist movements. There was I can't remember who it was. It was a famous feminist come out, and it was establishment, and they established like a really famous women's organization. I can't remember who it was, but they came out and they basically said, look, there's like so much backbiting and pettiness in which if any woman like stepped up and tried to take charge, they would be ripped down and dragged by the others as essentially using it as if they were trying to use it as a way to get clout and so on. There was an incredible amount of envy and jealousy within these movements, right? And this is like the reality of the situation. We have a lot of shame and envy in our society, and so we have a lot of stigma around sex work. And that stigma, as I've said, has a twofold sort of relationship to how the market works. In one sense, it bolsters the market because it reduces supply. In another sense, it limits the market because it also reduces demand. Okay, it prevents the development of the market. So that is basically how I think that the political economics has kind of got us to this scenario. Now I'm going to turn to the chat now. I know I've been going on for a while. I hope that I think I've covered most things that I wanted to cover in this. So we're going to turn to chat. If you've got any questions, drop them into the chat. If you want your question answered sooner, make a donation and I'll answer it. And yeah, just if you are actually, there was actually one more thing I wanted to say. Idealistically, what would I like to come from this? So one, I want those independent sex workers to continue in this road. I don't want them to fall into porn corporations or adult work corporations. I think they're highly exploitative. I think they're disgusting. And I think that if anything, we should seek to ban them. I think they're absolutely vile. I couldn't hate them more. I think that these networks are exploitative and objectifying to a point in which that has nothing to do with the content being produced necessarily, but more to do with the business model itself. Take someone like Maya Khalifa. She made like £9,000 off making videos which made millions of views. She decided that she didn't like the attention. She wasn't expecting this, right? She's getting paid $9,000. She's not getting paid millions. She's not getting paid like big bucks, right? She's making a sex video. Yeah, it's a bit it's a bit like controversial. It's and it's it's a bit spicy. She got paid £9,000, right? This isn't like nothing. What's £9,000, right? Like that's like not even a year's worth of survival, right? Like you're not gonna you pay your rent and some of your food costs and stuff, like your utilities and that. Maybe you could survive off 9K if you've really scrimped and saved. But like 9K is like now, right? Like it's nothing. So she makes a very small amount of money. Now the actual acts that she produced, I don't think like whatever. I don't think that that's there's anything inherently wrong with it. I don't think there's anything dehumanizing about it. I think that she's done something that the majority of people, the people who are watching, wanted to see, and the people and actively tried to consume. Okay, so she's producing a product that people in the market wish to consume, right? She's not doing anything that's highly unethical. She's not hurting anyone. Do you know what I mean? She's just performing a sex act. But obviously, it comes with its downsides. She feels objectified, right? She feels essentially exposed online. And so she wants to take that content down. But you can't take that content down because she's contracted. And so even though she got paid a minuscule amount, which has nothing to do with the value produced by the content, which is exactly what she should have gotten paid, the value of the product of her labor, she instead gets paid a fraction of that. She gets paid a small percentage, not even a small percentage. She gets paid a one-off fee for that, and then told to, hit the road, and then is left feeling exploited, not by necessarily the sex acts, which, many of the creators have already said they're pressured into performing acts which they wouldn't otherwise do, that they're put in situations where they don't feel safe, where their health and safety is put at risk, where they don't control the kind of content they're allowed to make, and it's entirely done by the corporation themselves. But then they don't even get to remove their information, their face and body, if they find this unacceptable, right? Let's say after the editing and after the product, after it's been produced, it's not what they are expecting. It's far worse. They feel that they've been deceived in some way, and they wish to take themselves out of it. They wish to take their information out of it. They're not able to do that, and I think that's deplorable. If you well, maybe look. Look, if you're saying that she made tens or maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars, and that's just straight up lying, apparently not. I mean, from what I've said, from what I know, she only got paid a few $1,000s. Regardless, look, the content made far more than what she got paid, right? Like the alienation of labor isn't something that I think is deniable. I think that the reality of the situation is that individuals get paid a percentage of the value they produce rather than the value they produce. And that percentage has to do with essentially the way the capitalist will actually run the business. It's even worse for men in the business, right? Like that totally exploited. Men get paid half of what women do, right? And it's not uncommon for people to get paid, a few thousand for pretty explicit sex acts, to be entirely honest with you, right? Anyway, so you want to remove your content. Let's say you just want to remove it. You feel like this is wrong. You should be able to do that. And the thing is, independent sex work lets you do that. So I think that independent sex work is the only sex work that I think that we should endorse. I think that people calling for OnlyFans creators whilst consuming porn from Pornhub are absolutely deplorable. I think you either look, if you're going to consume sex content, I haven't got a problem with that. You consume fair and decent sex content that's non-exploitative. Consume the content made by the creators themselves in their own environment. They price it themselves. They get paid, the vast majority of the money. And, don't get me wrong, I think OnlyFans is taking too much with 20%, but the relationship's still far more acceptable. They're getting paid a much larger amount of the value they've produced, and it's far less alienation. They can remove any of that content if they wish to remove it. If they wish to do something, they don't wish to do something, they don't get pressured into it. And, this is, I think, a much greater amount of freedom that an individual can actually have within that society. So I think independent sex work is by far, to a much larger degree, a more ethical mode of consumption of sex work in society than something like free porn. So if you have a problem with OnlyFans creators and you watch porn, then you just take a look in the mirror, because you're genuinely far worse than them. Anyway, then the next thing I wanted to say was essentially that what I would love to see, and it would, maybe it's a pipe dream, but if let's say let's say you're a sex worker, and you're realizing that, look, we are totally dependent upon these like platforms, man. We're totally dependent upon platforms which we are providing the content for. We are depending upon platforms which take a percentage of our income without really increasing our marketability. We're actually relying upon outsourced marketing. So what are we gaining from this other than enriching someone else? So there are two ways that I think sex workers can go about changing this. Become independents, as I've already said, make their own websites, but also cooperations. There is no reason why sex workers couldn't come together and make a platform, something like OnlyFans, which is more fair, which is in which they pay really the upfront costs of maintaining the website and take home 100% of their profits. That would be the ideal from this. Something which is absolutely fair, in which an individual gets paid for the product of their labor. Because of the economies of scale, they're able to engage in increased marketing together. They're able to offset costs together, and they're able to essentially help each other rather than compete and better each other's essentially livelihood. You could have it so that individuals have to essentially have a sign-up process to join, and so that you're only working with creators that you would agree with, like in terms of like type of content and so on. It doesn't have to be one unified cooperative. You could have many, but the point of the matter is it moves the ball game out of the hands of people who are going to keep you on this sort of hamster wheel of moving from one to another content. What's the word I'm looking for? One to another. Essentially, what are they called? Like shit. Like websites. I don't know what they're called now off the top of my head. Like essentially, they facilitate your content. Platform. Okay, moving from one platform to the other. Like, so you're not kept on this hamster wheel of moving from, let's say, Patreon to OnlyFans to AVN stars or whatever it might end up being. You can then just stay on this platform with the security of knowing, look, any money that this platform makes as a whole, you get a proportion of. It can be run at cost if you want it to be, so that you're not taken advantage of, and you aren't going to be kicked off for anything that is essentially a change in policy. You're not at the hands of somebody else. You're not actually at the mercy of someone who is just looking to profiteer from your the product of your labor. So that would be the ideal. So yeah. Okay. So now we are going to move to questions. If you have any questions, drop them into chat. I'll do my best to answer. And yeah, like let's try and make this like a nice environment for sex workers. I did see some people in chat calling sex workers and stuff. I think that I think at the end of the day, I think those people that are calling them are just insecure. I think if you've got a problem with sex workers, you probably got a problem with yourself. I think that you hate them because of something that's wrong with you, and you really need to become just a more compassionate and nice human being, to be entirely honest with you. So yeah, if you have any questions, drop them in the chat. PP, do you think men are less shamed and exploited in sex work? That's a good question. I don't know how to answer that necessarily, because I don't think men are less shamed and exploited in sex work, because it depends, right? Like, there are many men in, let's say, the porn industry, for example, who are made to do content that they would rather not do, because the demand for men is much lower and the supply of men is much higher. So when they're put in a labor market, they're actually exploited to a greater degree. They're paid lower. They're paid lower for their actions and their labor. They are exploited to a greater degree in that respect. You get people who are doing actions which, for example, they don't feel ideologically comfortable doing. So yeah, I think that saying that men get it easier would be, I think, too simplistic. I think that men probably face less envy, if I'm honest. But I think that's because of the objectification of women in society probably being greater. I think that women being placed on a pedestal and being more seen as more like sex objects makes them more, because they're more desirable, there's more to envy, essentially. But I don't think that necessarily means that men are exploited any less. In my one second. So isn't the problem the payment systems though? Even if people move to hosting their own sites, they still need to go through the payment systems banning this stuff. Yes, that is true. But obviously, there are essentially means of going around this. So, for example, PayPal seems to be pretty sex work friendly. I think that, to be entirely honest with you, it still seems to be like doable. There are actually quite a few content creators who have it set up so that they can take payment. And it's not too hard to do it. You can do it through like a third party and there are third party platforms. I can't remember the names off the top of my head, which will facilitate in taking payments on adult content. And there's you can do it through stuff like PayPal with Dropbox. So it's not like they're directly taken. You're not directly selling through some sort of shop. I think that there are plugins and stuff for websites. I think is it Bento Box and stuff like that. Which I think is okay to do it through. So yeah, there are ways to get around it. It's a bit of faff, and there is problems, but yeah. Does OnlyFans have any obligations to its creators? No, I don't believe so, because they're independent contractors. So I worked for Santander, by the way, a while ago as an independent contractor. And apparently it's all dodgy as hell. We probably shouldn't have been independent contractors. We should have been actually employees with the way that the business worked. There wasn't enough risk on our part, but whatever. So anyway, as an independent contractor, I wasn't even necessarily, I wasn't entitled to a break. I wasn't entitled to, I'm entitled to come in when I want, really. I'm entitled to work the hours that I want. I'm entitled to I have a lot more freedom, but I also have a lot more costs to myself. I don't get breaks that are covered. I don't get I don't get sick pay. So if I can't work because I'm sick, well, you don't get any money from that. And that's exactly the same with OnlyFans creators. They have no obligations to them. They're an independent contractor. But thank you for your question. Do I think that it's an innate thing to treat sex workers like this, or is it cultural? It's absolutely cultural. There's nothing innate, I don't believe, in terms of the sublimation of our desires. The way that we express our desires within society is really culturally orientated. The base drives, let's take a sex drive, right? The base drives in terms of a sex drive are entirely conditioned by cultural mandate. People don't even realize that how deep this goes. So, for example, if you were to develop something like I think I've used this example before, but if you were to develop something like OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, and you were to have, that's a bit of a broad category, but if you were to develop something like that, the way that expresses itself in your psyche, even though it's a psychological disorder relating to obsessive compulsive behaviors, is vastly different dependent upon even the religion you're in. So a lot of people with OCD experience, for example, intrusive imagery and compulsive behaviors, right? Intrusive imagery for Christians and compulsive behavior for Christians has a lot to do with blasphemy. So if you have OCD and it's tied to your religion and you're a Christian, it's probably going to be tied to notions of blasphemy, because the way that our religion is structured sees that which is wrong in terms of a rejection of divinity, like in terms of like demonic actions and Satanism and so on, right? Whilst if you look to something like fundamental religions, like in terms of Judaism or Islam, it has more to do with the fulfillment of ritual in the correct way. So they'll have intrusive imagery or compulsive behaviors about not fulfilling ritual in the correct way. And it's like, because what it has to do is with obeying divine command, obeying God. And so like, in terms of the very like every single desire that we have, every single way of understanding and engaging with the world that we have, it is structured by our ideology, by our culture, by the language we speak, and the way that we engage with one another, and the way that those desires are facilitated with one another. So no, I don't think that there is anything inherent about the way that we treat sex workers. I think that it definitely can change and develop and grow. So yeah, I think that when people say that this is undignified or wrong, and it begs the question, it's like, okay, even if it was undignified, why should I care about dignity? And even if it is undignified, why are we even classing this in that category of undignified? Why this behavior, and why in that category? We are fundamentally responsible for our very society as authors of ourselves and of this society as a whole. We are co-authors of what we normalize. And so we need to ask these questions and take responsibility for how we treat others, rather than point towards some sort of dogmatism which justifies the mistreatment of what is a fellow sensitive being. So thank you for your question. Doesn't OnlyFans offer more to the user than what you're claiming? It has great UI as well as servers to hold videos and photos. No way that could be done at cost. I mean, like one, it could be done at cost if you had individuals willing to pay that amount. Like, that's just the crack. Like, depending on what the costs were, it just wouldn't be like a corporate endeavor. Like, it couldn't be a corporate endeavor in that respect. I mean, a cooperative endeavor perhaps, which is what I said. Is it got a great UI? I mean, it's okay. I mean, it's not like necessarily any better than its competition. It's not like so much better than its competition, which is like AVN stars and stuff. And it's not something that would cost nearly as much to produce. You know, you could get a web developer to do that for a fraction of the cost. I mean, if you're thinking about how much money they're taking, which is hundreds of millions, saying that this UI, I don't know how much you think a UI costs, but I can certainly tell you that web development, sustaining the web development and the servers for OnlyFans, considering how much they're making, they're definitely profiting on that. I think that the main place that they're losing is things like ad campaigns, and they're trying to make themselves like and like changing like hearts and minds and stuff. They also used to offer a referral program which was way better, and that was to compete with websites like AVN Stars, because they offered like lifetime commission, and so OnlyFans used to offer 10% lifetime commission. Well, now they offer 5% for the first year, or up to $1 million. The reason that they did that was because they managed to essentially outcompete AVN Stars in terms of gaining the broader overall market, and then decided to cut it and make it worse than AVN Stars because there was no need to compete with them as hard. So the reason, like, thinking that they're necessarily the best of what they could be and that they care about the creators is totally a lie. So, for example, one of the biggest issues that creators have faced is backlash from the Bella Thorne incident, where she was charging $200 for a pay-per-view photo, but really that was supposed to be her nude, but she wasn't nude in it, and so people got ripped off and demanded refunds. And because of that, they limited the pay-per-view message and they put a price ceiling on that, like they capped the prices on that, so you could only charge up to $50. Now that causes issues in terms of how certain creators and certain niches in that market would monetize, right? Because the more of a niche market you have, the smaller the demand for that market, the more that you have to charge. And so if you're limited to that, you've also limited certain markets and their ability to function. And so certain creators were having to essentially put $50 at $50 at a time, whilst AVN Stars, for example, has no cap. So there was issues there. They were putting public image and public persona above the creators. And then this happened again with I mean, with what's going on right now, but this happened again. No, sorry, this is this like inability to consider the creators is something else. Like one of the biggest things that the creators complained about rather was the content being leaked or stolen. So individuals were stealing the content using screen capping software and then leaking it online. Now, OnlyFans doesn't block Steam capping software. So there's no reason like to think that like, look, OnlyFans are giving people what that like for the value that they're taking from these content creators. They are not providing them a service that they like. Look, if Netflix and stuff can do it, like I don't see that. I don't see why like Netflix, Now TV, and so on. I don't think that this is that super expensive software, to be entirely honest. I don't think that it's that difficult. I think that I think they could have paid for it. I think they chose not to. I think they're putting their own greed before the well-being of the content creators, and that's what we're seeing today. There's a need for sex or sexuality, so women are truly abusing in a way that drug dealers aren't. One, people on OnlyFans aren't just women. Like, there are loads of men on OnlyFans. The majority of the market is women, but that's because women have been objectified to the point in which they're they're seen as the object of desire anyway. Look, and at the end of the day, like, they're not abusing anything. Look, if you can't control yourself, that's on you, mate. Like, that's just you being inadequate in the sense of having your own ability to regulate your drives and emotions. Now, I definitely sympathize with that. Like, I understand that shit can be hard, but that's not for you to blame the creator. That's for you to seek therapy, right? Like, at the end of the day, like, blaming women for your inability to regulate your own drives is absolutely absurd. And then on top of that, right, you don't need to consume porn. You could be looking for relationships with women. You could be looking for something more sustainable in terms of your sex drive. You consuming certain content and creating habits around that content, which are then taken advantage of by a market, is part and parcel your fault. You are given in to a mode of consumption. You are acting and justifying that mode of consumption. If you do think that it's wrong, fine, don't consume it. But saying that it's my sex drive and there's nothing that you can do about it, psychologists and psychoanalysts do not agree with this. If you read, I think it's the book, The Games That People Play by, I can't remember the author now, I can't remember his name. He even talks about, people who always say, like, there's people who say, there's nothing I can do about it. I'm just overly sexed, and the antithesis to that is just, look, you are an individual who makes your own decisions. You are in control of how you express your drives. And this is standard in psychoanalysis and psychology, because if you weren't able to make these decisions, there'd be no hope of recovery. How you engage with like your own drives is on you and not on anyone else. Do I think that the hostility on sex work is partially based to its connection to STD throughout history? To be entirely honest with you, no. I don't think in contemporary times that would explain the hostility. I mean, like, maybe as an ideological hang-up, but not so much as a hostility towards sex workers in today's society who are, essentially virtual. Yeah. I mean, as well, like, a lot of the creators are even solo. Like, there's not even another person involved. Like, it's virtual solo content creation. Like, I mean, shit. Like, I don't think that. I mean, like, I think like the idea. I mean, you could say that the stigma maybe throughout history, but I think that, like, no, I just don't see that. PP, do we think that we have an incel problem? Yeah, I do. I think that, but I think that the incel problem, right? It's not that the incel problem is a symptom of a much greater ideological problem within society, right? Like, why have incels come around? Why are they blaming women? Why are they looking at everything in this forms of naturalism, right? They look at like, they're like, oh, woe is me, I'm doomed because women are by nature looking for men who are not me and who are better than me, and these chads will have sex with women whilst I can only gain employment and wealth and then hopefully buy a woman who will inevitably cheat on me. Like this kind of like black pill nonsense, to be entirely honest with you, is just it's just a fatalist ideology. It's not grounded in fact, and it's grounded really mostly from what have been debunked naturalistic takes in terms of human nature. There is no such thing as human nature. There is no fundamental human nature that we can point to where we go, oh, women are like this. That doesn't exist. There's no evidence to say that there is a human nature. And actually, if you want to read any, arguments against it, I would recommend a really great argument against it. It's by Paulo Verno, and it's called Natural Historical Diagrams, where he shows that actually what we have considered human nature is just historical reoccurrence, which has more to do with philosophical and ideological developments, which we look back to ideologies which are similar to ours and go, look, it was happening then too, therefore it's integral to our very being. It's like not the case at all. And then obviously there is this whole way of objectifying women. It's like women are this object of hate because they represent the very thing that they can never have. But it's like, look, man, like, have you ever thought that the reason that you're not successful with women is part and parcel to this ideology, that maybe the structure of your psyche is incompatible with you having healthy and decent relationships? And if so, like, ask yourself why you're incapable of having relationships which are, a little bit more healthy. Right? Like, think about therapy. You don't think about, like, blaming everyone. You think about, well, wait a minute. I think there's nothing necessarily wrong with me. It's a self-esteem issue, right? It's like a fragility. Maybe you are bullied. Maybe you faced a narcissistic abuse or something like that. Like, these things like play a massive role in how I think individuals who are so fragile like form. The next thing I would say is, there is a societal problem in how we consume. Like, look, people may have always had sex drives, which I do not deny, but the way that our sex drive has been exploited within the society to produce profit has been going on for at least like 100 years, right? Plus, it's just people, like, sex is everywhere. Sex is being used as a way to extract profit. And look, if when you're young and impressionable, for example, and you start watching something like porn, it can have a real negative impact on you. You don't realize the decision you're making here. Right, it's like starting smoking or something like that. In some respects, it's comparable. Like, you mightn't, if you are a young individual who's impressionable and you don't know necessarily the impacts of this, realize that you are endorsing a series of actions which are going to modify your desires massively. They are going to become, the more you consume, the more you're going to want to consume. The more that you consume, the more you are going to be habitually tied into that mode of consumption. The more you are going to associate yourself with that mode of consumption. You are going to say to yourself, I like X, or who I am is a person that likes X. I am defined by this mode of consumption. And the more you define yourself, I'm going so like ideological, I'm scratching my nose. Like, the more you define yourself in relation to that mode of consumption, the more difficult it's going to become for you to self-regulate in the future. And so I think that's what we're seeing with, incels today. I think that they've fallen down, rather than, seeing like, for example, like the sex drive motivating them towards self-improvement and they go to the gym, fix their appearance. The sex drive's motivating them with constant consumption, which is preventing them doing those things. They are motivated to sitting online, getting off to free porn, rather than I'm going to go to the gym or I'm going to engage in some sort of activity that is a form of self-growth. I'm going to go and socialize with people, right? And then I think that there is a third problem, which is this like ever-growing social media in which we're all in sort of constant connection with each other. We're permanently online and we're represented by small moments of like social being, right? So if you're not necessarily representing yourself well on there, if you're not necessarily the most desirable person, you're constantly being compared against other people. You are constantly being reminded by the architecture of the site that you're being compared against other people. I mean, shit, we've created a quote unquote dating site, which people used to think speed dating was a bit ridiculous, right? People used to think speed dating is too fast. You're not actually going to learn anything about individuals. Yet now we swipe right and left in a matter of seconds upon people's faces. And the structure and the architecture of our society has lent itself to a mode of consumption in which we don't actually learn about other individuals. We are hedonistically consuming based on looks and emotions. And because that is what moves us the easiest, right? And this is something that you can see in terms of marketing that has been going on since, Bernays, right? And when he wrote the book Propaganda, which is why, Coke bottles are shaped like, they used to be shaped like women, why cars were shaped the way they are. It's a way of motivating people using drives that they know to exist and a way to manipulate those drives. And like modes like Tinder take advantage of that. They use what is an individual's base appearance as a way to facilitate sort of sexual engagement with one another as a way to profit. It doesn't allow for deeper human connection. There's no possibility of personality really coming through, and it's preventing what would be healthier forms of relationships developing between individuals from developing properly. So I mean, like if I was you, I would recommend that get off Tinder and engage with people in real life. Find people with it doesn't have to be similar interests, similar values, right? Go to like university societies, converse with people, improve your social skills. And I'm saying this from someone who's probably autistic and or has ADHD. My social skills are not necessarily the best. I probably mask quite heavily. I know that I don't necessarily come across, like when I was young especially, I didn't come across as very human, and so people would outright reject me. So I know how it feels. But don't be disheartened. There's always room for improvement. Don't take the black pill because it's just dumb. Just do what you can. Like, see life as an adventure. You've got a chance to grow. Okay. Okay. So would you say that sex drives are human nature? I think the drive is human nature. So like in terms of like I don't think that drive has any form. So the way I like to put this in an analogy, and this is like very continental, that there is, when we say something like drive, what we mean is essentially the action urging processes that exist in an individual, but not necessarily any, it's the force without the direction. Okay. So the force without the direction. So this would be something like, compare this to scalars versus vectors. A scalar is pure quantity. So this is something like, I'm actually trying to think of, if I get an example of a scalar. So like scalar, I think would be speed. I think speed, Charlie, stop it. One second. Right, yeah. So we like speed versus velocity, right? So speed would be a pure scalar, a measurement of pure quantity or, a pure quantity, right? It doesn't contain any real information about how, like what an object is doing other than the time at which it takes to move between, like down a certain route. Velocity, however, gives you direction. It gives you an idea of the ways in which it is moving through this plane of existence, right? So in terms of desire, drive would be pure like the pure force of movement. It would be what motivates you towards doing anything, right? It would be like, I want something, right? But until you want a thing, right? Until you want some sort of like end goal, like until you have something in mind, it can't be satisfied. It has nothing to move you towards. Like this, it's unfulfillable, right? It doesn't actually drive you towards anything. So then you have desire. Desire is the sublimated drive in society. It's what moves you towards an object. You'd be like, I really want ice cream, and now you're like desperate for ice cream, right? That is like the difference between, I would say, drive and desire. So yes, I think drives, like action urging processes, exist inherently within us. Desires do not. Okay. I am a moral objectivist, yes. Is it possible for independent content creators to create a union? Well, yeah, it would be. I mean, like, it would just, like, look, like, you could make a cooperation, but yeah, there's no reason why they couldn't unite. I don't know necessarily the rules around creating, like, a non-profit organization in terms of a union. That would be specific to region. So yeah, I'm not entirely sure on that, but certainly in terms of how they engage with one another and, let's say, engaging in a cooperative endeavor, they could certainly create a cooperative. Create a cooperative. Wasn't there a study that people showed whether they were going to be romantically attracted to someone within the first 7 seconds of meeting them? Well, yeah, I think, like, look, like, the very structures, Iris Murdoch points towards this in terms of, like, even something like ethics. Oh, thank you for your donation, Wicked. When are we getting the source for this thumbnail? Asking for a friend. You can get that from Unsplash if you're that interested. Anyway. All right, yeah, and the assassination of Julius Caesar. That's like, anyway. Okay, so, yeah, so the structures, like, what you find is that actually the present moment when you, like, engage in phenomenology, and, like, Iris Murdoch shows this in terms of, like, ethics, we actually engage with structures of value that have been built up around us. So my experience of a laptop, I experience a laptop. I don't experience, like, some sort of material object in itself. I experience a phenomena. I experience a mix of my own understanding of the thing and the thing. It's not something separate from me. It is tied up in my understanding of it. So when you look at someone's face, you're going to know whether you're going to be attracted to them really quickly, because the way in which their face is structured to you implies the value. The value of your attraction is already there. It is being applied for you to understand the face, right? The next, like, Kant shows this with things like space and time, in terms of the transcendental and analytic. But, you know, Sartre even points towards, in his point on nausea, you know, the walls are making him nauseous, right? It's the walls themselves are the source of his nausea, because the walls are him. Like, what you realize in terms of idealism is that actually this world is not separate from me. I'm living in this. This world is me, and as such, I'm partially responsible for it. Drive tells you what you need in the short term. It doesn't tell you how to accomplish it. No, I would go a step further. It doesn't tell you what you need. It doesn't tell you anything. It's an experience. It's actually without content. the content of your drives is in desire, and that's the way in which you're socialized in the world, and that comes from society and culture. PP, how do you feel about the relationship between OnlyFans creators and managers entering the industry to run their accounts for them from the background? I have no problem with outsourcing. Like, look, if an OnlyFans creator wants to outsource something that they just simply cannot do, I'd just say, like, look, that if you're an independent contractor, I'm not a fan of managers at all. I think you know that, but I think that what they're talking about is someone really who runs something for them. They're actually producing, let's say, that content. They're probably administrators in this respect. Like secretaries and assistants. As such, work out the value, like talk to each other, try to engage in a fair relationship. They're just as much doing work as the creators themselves, and without them, the creators mightn't be able to make as much money as they would have. So, look, like, it's opportunity cost. They could do it themselves, but then they'd lose the opportunity to work more, or they could do it themselves. But they would also lose time to spend with their families or loved ones, right? So everything in life has a cost, and it has an opportunity cost. And I think that, I'm very much anti-manager, but I don't see them as necessarily the same managers as people who are, dictating people's behavioral patterns and structuring organizations. So yeah, trying to extract as much labor as possible. Do I think that pornography is an art form? Well, I think that art is anything that produces, pretty much. And as such, I think that there are ways to become, masters and better at whatever it is you're producing, to make something which is more valuable, which is more impressive. And often more meaningful. I think that, like, you can... Like, people who are producing porn just for the market, like just trying to make as much market, like, profit as possible for the market, probably aren't engaging it in the right way. You want to produce something that you are proud of, that when you look at it, you go like, look, this is actually something that I'm happy to have my name associated with. That this is something that I am proud that if I look towards that and go, I'm glad I made that. A sense of creative satisfaction. So yeah, I would say that it's an art form. So yeah. PP, going back to king shaming, have you ever heard where a group of people were charged from practicing BDSM by the state because none of them wanted to press charges? I don't know what you mean. You mean all of them consented, yet the state pressed charges anyway? I have heard of that happening with a boy who was 17, engaged in BDSM with older men. It was totally legal because 16 is the age of consent in the UK, but but actually I'm not sure if it was legal in the sense that I think the age of consent, I'm not sure at the point if whether the age of consent was higher for homosexual contact there, because it still actually is. I think it might still even be 18 for homosexual contact, which is kind of disgusting. Well, it's actually very disgusting. The age of consent should be unified for any sex act, but I'm not sure if it is the same now. But regardless, they weren't charged for anything like that. They were charged with breaking they were charged with assault, actual bodily harm for breaking his skin, because UK law essentially limits consent to that of breaking your skin, apparently, in terms of sexual consent. You can't consent to be, like, made to bleed, which I think is fairly reasonable in many ways. I think that there are levels of harm which, I mean, if it's accidental and it wasn't intentional to break skin, then maybe, but then, and obviously not just break skin, but cause lasting damage. Anything that causes lasting damage and loses function in terms of an individual loses function, that shouldn't be legal. That's not something that you can consent to. No, your desires have evolved to tell you specifically what you need, but yet there's no evidence for that. Like, there is no evidence for that at all. So, yeah, philosophically, it's an incorrect argument. Like, naturalism hasn't managed to actually explain, like, what you need in society. Like, an individual psyche is developed so that they can identify what they need. And there's no reason to believe that this inherent knowledge exists within you, where we can point towards like, oh no, there's this inherent knowledge that we all share, because we can find not only outliers but individuals which are the exact contrary, right? People like to think that, for example, you have a necessary drive for survival, yet we'll find that people have a desire to kill themselves. No, like there is no evidence to say that there is an inherent human nature. So sorry. Will OnlyFans even last without sex work? I don't know. I mean, that only time will tell, right? But like, that goal isn't content creation anyway. That goal is the next round of investors. The game they're playing isn't about making money on the creation of content. That game is about making money from investors, from increasing investors time and time again. John Doe, am I a socialist? Yes. Market socialist. What do I think about intellectual property? Can you steal an idea? I'm actually quite against intellectual property, to be entirely honest with you. I don't think that you can own an idea. No. I don't think there's anything like metaphysically that is attributable to you, because the individual has to think it themselves in any way. So no. Someone just call me a rad lib. Never call me a liberal again. Ugh. Disgusting. Great news, to be honest. Sex work needs to be regulated a lot more. I don't think this is. What do you mean? Like, I don't think that it. I think that it needs to be regulated in the sense that it needs. We need to make sure that people aren't committing any illegal activities. But I think that this isn't going to increase regulation. So I don't know where you're getting that one from. And even then, like, it depends on what you mean by regulation anyway. And we need to make sure that people aren't doing things that are illegal. We don't necessarily need, corporations telling people what to do. If you could simulate the experience of breaking skin through some very advanced VR, would that be okay? I don't even know what that would mean, man. Do you mean like if you could have the pain sensation and stuff, like, when they're talking about like neural link and stuff like that? One, I would say that the initial act of doing it would be negative. I think that the engagement in it could end up causing some genuine issues within society. So I don't know, man. I don't like the idea of it, if I'm honest. I think that it could lead to some pretty negative outcomes in which people experience things they weren't expecting to experience, and that the actual act of the experience of pain can even go beyond that consent, that initial experience of pain. Then the lasting psychological impact that it can have upon individuals, regardless of any physical lasting causes, like lasting impact, lasting damage. So yeah. How am I trapped in my perspective? Like, because I'm not an incel. Would I say that it's human nature to be ideological? I'd say no. It's not that it's human nature to be ideological. It's that ideology is a product of our attempts to fulfill our drives. So if I say like drive is a human nature in the sense that there are drives, and it's not necessarily human nature either. Like, this is the issue, right? It's not like some sort of nature because we are human and blah like X. It's because we are conscious, willful agents that we are driving towards something. When you posit human, you're already giving like some sort of identity from which we are working through, an understanding of self. I think that this predates that. It predates that like notion, that essence that we are attributing to ourselves. It's not that because we are human, it's because we have those drives before we even realize we are human, in this respect. Before we even produce like a nature, quote unquote. Any sort of quote like nature isn't actually a nature, and we shouldn't look through the lens of nature to explain our consciousness when nature is actually the product of mind. And this is like an existential issue, right? You can't propose an essence prior to existence. But like, essentially, do I think that that ideology is a product of nature? No. Or that it's human nature. It's human nature to be ideological. I'd say that it's human nature to have drives, and drives produce, like, human engagements will always produce ideology. So yeah, it's not like it's natural. Like, ideologies are gonna like pop out the nether. Like, oh my god, I'm naturally a socialist. When I publish my idea, is there anything here that I've said that you're incapable of thinking yourself, that if you wanted to go and make content yourself, that I could stop you from making? If you copied us word for word, then I'd say that you're stealing the product that I'm producing. But if you go and take the ideas that I've the concepts that I've conveyed into your mind, and you were to produce your own content through your own labor that is not identical to mine, that's yours, right? Robert Evans, what if corporations are telling people to not to be homophobic or sexist? Like, look, you can't tell someone to not be homophobic or sexist. That takes self-endorsement. You can't force moral progress. It's not to say that they're wrong in like trying to convince people to not be homophobic or sexist. It's more that you can't force someone to not be homophobic or sexist. You can only enter a dialogue with them and go like, look, you probably shouldn't do this, and this is why. And that's why it should be like trying to, put someone through like a work seminar, like why you shouldn't be homophobic, is not going to stop them from being homophobic. If anything, it's caused a backlash, a massive backlash, which increased hate rather than reduced it. Market socialism still has some of the same things inherent to capitalism. Even if all businesses work at co-ops, it would still be private economy. Well, yeah, it would still be private enterprise, but I think that I think the removal of private enterprise and the move towards a communist state would crush subjectivity and the individuals within it. Comrade Lenin. I'm not gonna lie. I think that the USSR, the travesty that is the USSR, leads to, and not just the USSR, but other communist states, prevents the expression of subjectivity. It prevents individuals from actually experiencing and it prevents individuals from understanding the world as a free agent. You can only be free, I would say, in a state which allows for individuals to express themselves separate from some sort of abstract state ideology. You don't have the state tell you what you can and cannot do in terms of like what job you will perform or how much this job will pay. And so on. I think that overall, that undermines the very tenets of what Marx, I think, was going for. and especially Hegel. It certainly is not compatible with a Hegelian system. Anyone trying to tell you that Hegelianism is compatible with totalitarian or authoritarianism, they're wrong. What's your opinion on porn? I don't feel that the state should legislate morality, but I feel that we've gone too far in terms of sex and horniness being normalized in everyday culture. Well, if you look, that's not like the state legislating morality anyway. There are certain things that the state has to intervene on, in terms of breaching the subjectivity of another, right? That's the idea of the law. But in terms of the restriction and the mediation of desires, that's not about the institutions that exist in your state necessarily to consume anyway, for your consumption anyway. It has more to do with how you're understanding yourself within those institutions, for one, but also whether there are other institutions with how you understand yourself in terms of what you wish to consume. What's your relationship to your drives? What ideology have you engaged in? So for example, I think a lot of the issues here come from capitalism itself. I think it comes from this hyper individualism, where we're all trying to express these quote unquote inherent drives, right? As if there's something that happiness is found in hedonism, and it's something that we've been sold, and it's something that's untrue. And what we need to turn towards is an ideological mediation of ourselves, in which we can feel at home within our culture and in our relationship to our drives. If you have a problem with necessarily the over sexualization and over objectification of our culture, I think that that's a fair critique, to be entirely honest with you. I think that the way to express that is to essentially put forward an alternative. You support corporations censoring racist, sexist, and homophobes. Why are you suddenly outraged by people censoring porn? One, I would certainly not compare porn with something like racism, sexism, and homophobia, because one is actively harmful, whilst one is not. Porn does not necessarily hurt anyone, whilst racism, sexism, and homophobia is based upon the discard of another individual's interests, the rejection of another individual as being equal and deserving of fair treatment. So racism, sexism, and homophobia goes again. It's not that they are censoring racism and sexism and homophobia, in the sense that they are censoring what is a positive action of an individual. They are censoring an individual impeding upon the subjectivity of another. And then with porn, that's not the case. There is nothing that is impeding upon your subjectivity. So they say that they're comparable, I think is not the case. Then I would also say that, look, if a corporation doesn't want to engage in porn, fair enough, but to build a market based off porn so that then you can use this as a way to secure investment later down the line and betray everyone in that market, all of the creators within that market that are dependent upon this platform that you've provided, which you've profited from, which you are continuing to profit from, and you are doing it for your own personal gain off the backs of those individuals who are producing the content, is, to be entirely honest with you, exploitative. That's my problem. It's not that they don't want to have porn on their platform. If you don't want porn on your platform, fair enough. If you accept having porn on your platform for a time in order to exploit those individuals who are engaged in porn, and then use that as a way to catapult into your own interests, then you're deplorable. You're an exploitative person. It has nothing to do with the porn. It has to do with their behaviors and their relationship with the workers on that platform. When is it okay to make generalizations? Is being careful around men because some are rapists as wrong as being careful around a black guy because they have higher crime rates? I think that these generalizations are wrong in general. I think that you should you should allow people to know that what a dangerous situation is. I think that's common sense. Look, don't go down back alleys on a night out or something, or when you're drunk, stay with friends. You're not saying look, that this should happen or that this is acceptable. But you're saying like, look, if you don't engage in this behavior, then you're more likely to come to harm. I think that's actually respecting the individual. You're saying like, we don't live in a perfect world. Look after yourself. I think there is another thing to say that all men are rapists or black people are criminals or something like that. I think that is prejudicial. I think that it's non-representative. I think that if it is like, look, you can even point out like that there are problems culturally in a community, and Slavoj Žižek does this really well. He even says like, look, all ideology is shit, every culture is shit. There are problems in everything, and for example, what crime is indicative of that. We all have certain crimes which are culturally manifest more than others, and they tell a story about our culture and our relationship to our desires and our relationship to each other, and that's what we need to learn the lesson of. Not play a blame game or anything like that, but also, I do understand when people are just trying to aid people in terms of safety. If someone's saying be careful in X scenario because rape is an actual issue, I don't have a problem with that. I think I would definitely tell, like, I tell people that in general. Like, I think, like, in terms of dangerous scenarios, I'd be like, look, don't walk home late at night, and don't essentially engage in, like, quote unquote risky behaviors in our society, because it can sometimes lead to consequences which are wrong, which are deplorable, but you've increased your likelihood of coming into contact with that form of criminality. That doesn't mean I support it, and I would actively, try to go against it, but that's just the way life is. But to generalize, like, a whole group of individuals in relation to a small minority of those individuals, I think is equally as deplorable. It makes individuals, it's essentially just a power play, I would say. Do I think that my personality nudged me to be a socialist? No, because I used to be right-wing. I used to be really right-wing as a kid. Like, when I was much younger, I used to be like a royalist. Like, very much, I wanted to be in the military. There's, so no, I wouldn't say that my personality led me to be right-wing. I think that I've always had a strong sense of justice. I think that I've always fell on the side of equality, because of my understanding of equality. I think that I was raised in Catholicism, which definitely played a role in this. But do I think that my personality necessarily made me a socialist? No, I think my personality, led me to be more right-wing, if anything. I'm still right-wing. How? How? The royalist, the socialist arc, exactly. I'm glad that helped. Falsificationism. Who said socialism is about subjectivity? Ethics is about subjectivity. Socialism is about mediating the material relationship between individuals, which is preventing freedom. And Marx said that. So yeah, sorry, American first futurist. Actually, find the quote for you if you like. Just me in every tanky. 1 second, I'll find the quote. I don't know if I've got the quote. A society in which the full and free development of every individual forms the ruling principle. That is how Marx described a communist society. So, and Lenin talks about society as individuals having the capacity to rule themselves. It's an anarchist utopia, basically. Only idiots understand the Marxist-Leninist tradition to move towards some sort of concrete authoritarianism which crushes the subjectivity of individuals. So, yeah. Anyway. Do I have the a take on Hassan buying a $3 million house? Not really. I mean, like, look, I don't know who's shocked at Hassan being stupidly rich. Like the guy is definitely pulling in like a 7-figure income. So yeah, I don't know. Like, do I think that like a socialist buying a $3 million house? I think that like I would probably feel wrong doing it. I think that there is I think that he should have invested that money in a way that would be fairer to other individuals. I don't know how much of his income he's given away. Like, look, the guy could be given like I doubt it, but I think like he could be given like 50% of his income away every year, and engaging in his duties in society in a way which is more respective and healthier than most individuals. I don't know. I'm not going to condemn him because he bought a house necessarily. I think that it's not necessarily the way that he should have spent his money, but it's not necessarily the worst thing either, right? Like, the guy could be overall doing a lot more good than harm. So that's a consequentialist take. He could be fulfilling his duty more than anything. Like, he could just be like essentially engaged in society in a way that fulfills his duty more than he otherwise would be required to, going beyond the call of action, or the call of duty, if you will. Pornography did kill the dinosaurs. That's true. I heard that. Racist speech harms no one. Yes, it does. If you think that racist speech harms no one, then you clearly don't understand racist speech. And you clearly don't understand the human psyche. Like, the harms that happen to individual are not physical in manifest. Like, what harms, like even what physical harms have psychological repercussions. Like, anything that demeans an individual in terms of recognition causes them psychological damage. It causes them to understand themselves and engage in society in a way which is not necessarily good or healthy, which is why you have trauma. So yeah, not racism is 100% a form of committing a harmful action upon somebody else. Do I think that animals have a moral status to the extent that we cannot kill them, or do you think that they have equal moral status to humans? I think they have equal moral status. I think that, like, it depends on what you mean by moral status. I don't think that our duties towards humans and animals differ depending upon the animal, the human, the context, just as our duties towards other humans differ. Like, my duties towards my mother, my girlfriend, my dog all differ because of my context within society and the institutions I'm in. But the value of all sentient beings is equal. So it's not that there is like some sort of hierarchy of value that exists within nature, but rather that we are responsible for the production of, for the understanding and the understanding of nature and our actions to produce the greatest overall possible value in the world, which is why we produce duties which try to reflect these laws of right that exist in nature, where we try to respect, the interests of others to the greatest degree, and why the law primarily works in negatives to undermine the damage that we would cause otherwise to each other before we engage in positive laws, and try to promote like positive activities towards each other. I'm obligated first not to do harm before I'm obligated to, try and produce some sort of positive effect. And in as much, I think that we are all obligated to not harm sentient beings, like through meat, dairy, and egg consumption, for example, or through any other form of animal agriculture. Did I say that my Catholicism led me to be more equal? I think that Catholicism taught me to consider others as I would love others as you love thyself. I think that like equality within Catholicism is, I'd say that Christianity distributed equality massively amongst our society. It's not the same as it necessarily developed into, but Christianity certainly has notions of equality which it spread throughout society. Everyone's equal under God. You know what I mean? And then, but really, it then created a hierarchy in Catholicism. There was whole power plays within it. There was hegemony. There was a lot of messy stuff. But there was a lot of ideology about essentially salvation through God that everyone can fulfill within Catholicism. And Catholicism, the name even means universal. So yeah, I do think that there is. I do think that I gained a lot of my notions of equality from Catholicism. PP live stream chat is the Wild West, lawless and chaotic. Good times, absolutely. Individualism is right wing. Like, look, I think like it depends on what you mean by individualism. I think like individualism as a one-sided relationship, like that we see a lot in our society today. Yeah, but I think lack of individual, lack of of individuals at all, is not right wing. If you look towards like even left Hegelians, a lot of them promote individual, the manifestation of individual subjectivity. It's not like I am no longer an individual with my own private interests. No, that would be nonsense. Because then we have to ask ourselves, well, what is this abstract state in which there is no individual instancing of? If it is a universal, where's the particular? Where's the individual in which it exists within? Or is it a platonic form that exists above us all? Like, that is ridiculous. Like, Hegel's not arguing for a form of like exaggerated realism or something like that. He'd be arguing for a form of something close to perhaps indifferentism, or Aristotelian realism, in terms of how the universal operates with the individual. So with every individual should be a manifestation of freedom. And so an individual should be able to dictate their own life, and the society which allows an individual to dictate their own life and engage freely within society is the one which is actually allowing the expression of freedom. That freedom does not necessarily mean that an individual can do whatever they want, like express their desires in an unregulated way. It means that they should express desires which are healthy and regulated, but be able to do it in an individualistic way, that they are their desires, that they claim ownership of them, which is actually why, like, even if you look to the authoritarian nature of the Hegelian schemata, it's really just an empty figurehead. Like, the king is just subjective, like, it has no subjectivity in and of himself, but all the laws have to be embodied by a king, for the very reason that it has to be the objective will of the people given subjective form. And he says that much, I think, in the Philosophy of Right. And that's what I would argue. I'd say that anyone who tries to say that Hegel is entirely against individual liberty is an idiot. Like, they don't know Hegel, like, to be entirely honest with you. I think Infrared started coming across like that. But the guy, I think that he's read Hegel a little bit, but not really. I haven't, Will Smith, I haven't read The Most Good You Can Do. I'm afraid. Yeah, insects are animals, Robert. I'm not gonna lie. Also, yeah, like, I do think that, you know, like, I don't think that there should be hate speech laws. People should not be handcuffed for saying offensive things. It's not about offensive things. It's saying things that dismiss the value of other individuals. Like genuinely committing harassment or abuse or things like that. Like, to deny that an individual can take an action to harm another just with their use of their mouth, I think a little bit naive. And I think that allowing individuals to engage in things like abuse and harassment would be wrong. But we already have laws against that. We don't need hate speech laws. We already have laws which go against like the incitement of violence or harassment or abuse or anything like that. So I don't think you can police individuals from being like racist. I don't think that you can do anything about that. I have read some Augustine, Isaac. Do I think billionaires are immoral? Yeah. They're not immoral because of the wealth that they've got. They're immoral for how they've got the wealth, and the way in which they engage in larger society. Do I support any reparations for ugly people? No. How would I respond to someone who rejects veganism on egoist grounds? I would say that they have a misunderstanding of their self, that they are assuming their own values and drives and also its own values and interests, and it's a one-sided notion of themselves, and it will lead them to misery. I would reject Ayn Rand and all of that by saying, like, essentially, it's not that she was wrong in saying that all, like, you know, like what we need to be driven towards is some sort of self, like inherent like self value that exists in our drives and in our life, as she calls it. But she's wrong about that. But like in our drives, but rather that her notion of self is to assume that an inherent psychological makeup from which we have access to innate knowledge doesn't exist. So yeah. She assumes the self is an individualistic endeavor and not a communal result, not the result of a communal endeavor, which I think is the mistake. All the incels got lured in by the thumbnail boober, possibly. How should society address pedophilia? Criminalize it. I think certainly. I think that. I think that prison sentences are justified. I hate when people say that, people who commit like sex acts against children or download child porn or something just need therapy or something. That's disgusting. No, they know what they've done. They've committed a crime and they deserve punishment. That being said, if someone is having a psychoanalytic problem, they're coming forward. They've not done anything wrong. They're saying, look, I have a drive I cannot reconcile. I'm having to be abstinent because the way that I would wish to express my sex drive is unhealthy and wrong. Can you help me? We should certainly help those people for the greater good of themselves and society. It's just for everyone's benefit to give them therapy, to help them deconstruct and work out why they've turned out this way. I think from a utilitarian perspective, Marxist-Leninism could be justified. I think that Marx and Lenin would probably roll in their graves if you were to say that. If you were forced to choose between Marx-Leninism and ANCAP, which would you choose? I think, I hate both of those so much. Would I choose ANCAP or Marxist-Leninism? I think both are going to end up with the individual subjectivity of the individual being crushed by like unjust power structures. One might lead to hedonism and like consumptive like ideologies, which are like lead to depression and existential crisis, and the other is just going to essentially basically be a neurotic society in which all expression of desire is regulated and controlled to the point which any expression becomes basically criminalized, that you can't be happy without it being or free without it being a crime. So no, I don't really like those choices, man. Socialist, humanist. I don't know. It's like Marxist-Leninism might like, it'll allow people to have at least freedom from certain negatives, at least in the, like, so like they might have childcare, healthcare, freedom from pains of nature. The ANCAP society probably wouldn't allow for that, but would allow them to express their desires. So I think I'd probably lean towards the more authoritarian left in terms of like, I think the outcomes would be better, but I think that they would both be really bad. I think that I prefer the freedom, at least inherent in the anarchist kind of conception, and it does leave the room open for a moral development or an ethical development, which would lead them towards anarcho-socialism. And they wouldn't necessarily need to have some sort of revolution, to go and fight some sort of authoritarian terroristic regime like that was seen in the USSR or in even Catalonia, where they crushed the anarchists there. So, like, I don't know. I can't decide. I'm sorry. They're both terrible. Please don't ever make me do that again. Right. I think I'm going to bail. So right. So if you have any quick questions, you can drop them in a chat. I'll answer the next 3 questions. If you want your question answered and you definitely want it answered, just donate and I'll answer that first, obviously. If you do have a question that you can just drop in a chat, I'll answer the next 3. And then I'm going to leave and then kind of round this out at about 2.5 hours because I want people to actually click it. So, yeah. So just drop your questions in the chat, or if you have a question that you want to ask, then donate. And you guys, like everyone watching, please subscribe. I get like 50% of my viewers don't subscribe. That hurts. So yeah, bro, claiming that an animal have equal moral status, a human. I am doing a PhD in philosophy. Let's debate that propositions. Don't be scared, homie. Yeah, sure, 100%. Why would I be scared? I'm also doing a PhD in philosophy. Are you doing analytic philosophy? Or are you doing continental philosophy? Do I think that humanity is doomed? Capitalist realism, extinction? Yeah, we're probably fucked. I mean, like, not humanity as, like, the species, but, like, I think there's going to be some really bad stuff happen in the next 100 years. Climate change. I think that even right now, like, in terms of the political displacement, I think that the what's going to come to head between, Pax Americana and the growing power structures within the Chinese influence is going to probably come to a head to some point. It's either going to lead to like some sort of horrific war or some sort of massive ideological shift or something. I don't know. Analytic philosophy. All right. Well, I'll do my best to like engage with you. I can't guarantee that we'll be speaking the same language half the time, but yeah, happy to. Just drop us drop us a message on Discord. That's probably the best way to do it. Do I think it's already use of motion to manipulate my audience into subscribing to you? Yes. How else is a socialist? Vosh taught me that as a socialist, I do not have to engage differently in capitalism than any other capitalist. In fact, because I am a socialist, I need to be able to compete within capitalism and defeat my capitalist foes in order to better perpetuate this socialist ideology. So if you don't subscribe to me, then you hate socialism. That's all I can really say. Vosh told me to say it. Is Marxism pseudoscience? It's not science, man. Right. And I think that's it. Okay. Right. So thank you everyone for watching and partaking in this video. If you'd like to, please give it a thumbs up. Consider subscribing. Check out my Twitter, where I get called eco-fascists and a Malthusian and all of the nice things that the tankies have been calling me of late, as well as just engaging in random stuff and also making images of Sisyphus holding a rock with the flag of Afghanistan on the underway of the United States flag. So yeah, this is what I do in my time. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, And as always, try to gain some perspective.